Welcome to day 9 of my father's recollections of the war years from his memoir, The Last Mile. Now, Dad starts off by saying that I don't think people realise how close we came to being invaded by the Japanese. I found a telling statement by Herbert Kikoi dated June 23, 2018. Herbert was the guest author of an article, P-40 Warhawk Workhorse of the Australian and New Guinea campaigns, and I'll put the link on my Facebook page. He says the 11th of March saw the invasion of New Guinea by Japanese forces. Its location was vital. If the Japanese could take it, then they were in a strong position for launching an invasion of Australia. It's a very sobering thought. Now, the other big controversy was something called the Brisbane Line, and I have found a hand-drawn mud map that redraws our defensive line for Australia. You will note that Thursday Island is right there playing a role. I found the photo online and I'll put the link on my Facebook page for you. Now, Dad's recollections of what life was like at the time and how people were thinking just makes me more thankful for the sacrifices made by those men and women for the freedom we have enjoyed in Australia for over 50 years. And Earl Taylor takes up the story from here.
I don't think people realise how close we came to being invaded by the Japanese. The Japanese were advancing rapidly southwards, and if they hadn't been stopped, it was only a matter of time before they'd been landing on our shores. At federal level, there were denials about the Brisbane Line, a supposedly fictitious line drawn across Queensland, where the idea was to sacrifice Queensland and put all the resources into fighting to save the southern states. Thankfully, common sense and nationalism prevailed, and the war effort came one to save the whole nation. Brisbane during the war had special arrangements in place. Each night the searchlights would beam in the air, and during school days, schools were on staggered shifts in the event that if Brisbane got bombed, it wouldn't wipe out the next generations. In the schools, trenches were dug and children were given drill instructions on survival. Food was scarce and families were issued ration books from their local police station. This entitled families to purchase food, including meat, butter, tea and bread, and quantities were limited. There were ration books for clothes too. Petrol was rationed and people got around on bicycles. In Brisbane, military police would roam the streets ready to spot trouble from servicemen drowning out the war in local hotels around Spring Hill, the local watering holes for servicemen. At night, blackout rules were in place. Windows had to be blackened out and Brisbane was in high alert, particularly after Darwin was bombed. A wave of fear swept through the population and some families discussed plans in the event the Japanese invaded Queensland. Thelma's mother was terrified and she made a pact with her husband John that if the Japanese invaded, he was to shoot her and the children rather than let them fall into Japanese hands. Troop trains were constantly running from Brisbane to Cairns, taking reinforcements and bringing back servicemen on R&R, rest and recreation leave. The black market boom, with cigarettes being the main trade. Queensland was overrun by American servicemen, cashed up and looking for a good time. My sister Pam recalls that despite the threat of invasion, Brisbane still felt safe. There was always soldiers, sailors or airmen on leave or preparing to be shipped out. Every night the Postal Institute building housed small ship's crews, and on Saturdays, if Pam wasn't working, she'd go into the transit centre in the city as a volunteer to make beds on wait on tables for soldiers from New Guinea who would be processed there before going on leave. Letters home and letters and parcels to the soldiers at war were precious commodities. And I wrote this tribute to the humble pen that we used at camp to write letters to our loved ones at home.
The pen. A common scratchy little pen from which a tale doth flow, of sorrow or of heartbreak, of love or hate or woe. A soldier sits with down-bent head, strange thoughts are come and gone, a scratching all the while, the pen writes slowly on. He seals the letter with a sigh and lays the pen aside. Though he is gone, the pen remains there, waiting to be plied. The hut is still, but not for long, for someone comes, and then, as plainly as it was before, the scratching starts again. The war goes on, the years roll by with passing tide of men, their lives and loves recorded by that same old scratchy pen.